All Asians look the same. Can you do my math homework? When does your visa end? Go back to China. Oh my god, why are there so many Asian people here? When did you move to the US? Your English is almost perfect. Konnichiwa. Ni hao ma. I hire Asians because they always make the best workers. Oh, you're good at that because you're Asian. What's wrong with having the stereotype that you're a good worker? That benefits you. You shouldn't complain, you're being sensitive. Can you do my math homework? When did you move to the US? Your English is almost perfect. Konnichiwa. When does your visa end? Oh, you're good at that because you're Asian. Ni hao ma. You shouldn't complain, you're being sensitive. Konnichiwa. Go back to China. All Asians look the same.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Where Are We Now, 1 year later? I'm Jennifer Tu. I am privileged to serve as your host today. I'm a medical student going into psychiatry, but we are now among our expert panelists who are all mental health experts in their fields, as well as clinician educators and more even than that, community advocates and educators with experience as parents themselves. So our goal today is to talk about some of the traumas and triggers that Asian American communities are going through today, to equip each community member with ways to respond and to communicate effectively within their families. So first of all, I'd like to provide a brief overview of what we'll be doing. So we are in our welcome and introductions right now. After that, we'll have a panel presentation. So our wonderful moderator, Dr. Yuan, will introduce the speakers, or I will introduce the speakers, and she will be moderating a discussion with them. After each speaker, we'll have a very brief polling break. So this will be somewhat interactive for everyone in our audience. And then we'll have a Q&A with the panelists. Very important disclaimer for today is that our goal is not to offer professional medical advice, but to provide a platform for discussion. And so if you do need medical advice, we highly encourage you to seek out professional medical care. In addition, we really want to preserve your anonymity and confidentiality. So if you prefer to, you can change your name on Zoom to anonymous, especially during the Q&A. And last but not least, we are using the Q&A function in Zoom, not chat. Chat can be used for logistical notes or general comments like thank yous to the panel. But your questions can go directly into that Q&A box. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our president of United Chinese Americans for some brief remarks. Dr. Haipei Shui, he's an amazing community advocate. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to him.
Thanks, Jennifer, for the introduction. And my name is Haipei Shu, the president of United Chinese Americans. I'm so honored to be able to say a few words right up front. And I would like to first, before I forget, to thank the Yale Psychiatrist Group and our wonderful, wonderful panelists and volunteers. Without them, this is totally impossible. This is a special day today. I think I'm very excited to hear that you're going to discuss about traumas, all these events in our own life, and even generational traumas. How do we share them? How do we talk about them? And how does those talking and sharing of these traumatic events in our life will only strengthen us? But this particular day today is the first anniversary of the Atlantic shooting. I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of that. UCA has organized about 20 cities candlelight vigil within 4 days, turning out about 100,000 people. It's an amazing thing that has happened if we still remember and go back to that very traumatic day and that very traumatic weekend. At UCA, we will forever remember those 8 lost lives, and through our continued community work and outreach, we will continue to honor them, giving the meaning to the world in which they once lived and loved. Indeed, their life will be continuing the source of our strength, our resilience, and our renewed hope for a better America. Thanks for everyone here.
Thank you so much. And so without further ado, we will start our panel. I have the honor of introducing our moderator, Dr. Eunice Yuan. She is a professor of psychiatry at Yale, as well as the founder and director of Yale Chat Together, or Compassionate Home Action Together. I would encourage everyone here to check out their website because they have so many amazing educational tools, including video role plays to help families communicate better between generations. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Dr. Yuan now.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone to join us tonight, and really appreciate our panel, our event team who selflessly pulling everything together in such a short period of time. And I think we get together for a really meaningful reason. As Haipei mentioned, that like it is a whole series of trauma that happened around us, and exactly one day, same 1 year from today. And I want to take this moment to remember the victim of Atlanta shooting violence that happened last year. The 6 out of 8 victims are Asian American women. Our hearts go out to the victim and the families. These were the individuals who had loved ones, passion, and dreams and life. So let us take a moment to remember them. Shao Yi Tang, Dao Yu Feng, Delina Yun, Paul Andreas Michaels, Soon Park, Young Grant, Sanka Kim, and Yong Yoon. There are too many innocent victims of hate crime against Asian American. The Stop AAPI Hate received more than 10,000 hate crime since 2020. Most of them targeted elderly, women, and children, and particularly with a statistic profile against Chinese Americans. Then we hear the COVID crisis peak in Asia, Hong Kong, where many of our loved ones really are there, and they have a low vaccination rate at this time, and really seeing that repeat what happened in the US. And on top of all of that, we have a war in Ukraine. And all of this collective trauma really remind our own past trauma history. Some of the very vulnerable, darkest moments that we seldom get a chance to organize them, to talk about it as parents, or even how do we navigate this conversation with our children. Today, we are here together and we stand in solidarity with each other, with our Asian American brothers and sisters, along with everyone here and all the organizations here. We stand together against hate crime. Together, we defeat the hate, fear, misinformation. Together, we are stronger and unafraid today. And I hope tonight we can create a holding space for every one of us. And I also hope that people allow ourselves to be vulnerable together. Non-judgmental when we hear some of our speakers share one of the really intimate, vulnerable experience together as parents and as physicians. Now tonight and also in life, I wear many hats in my life. I'm a proud mother of 2 Asian American sons and also a child adolescent psychiatrist with a specific interest for Asian American mental health. So I want to start off with some of the educational material, really share some of these fundamental concepts, like how do we navigate about trauma so that we can be a better parents to our children and the next generation of AAPI children. So next slide, please. So one of these concepts that I want to share is about AIDS, adverse childhood experiences. This is one of the really classic study who have done by CDC many years ago. And they look at 17,000 of adult individual, and they try to look back to what happened to their earlier childhood experiences and correlate to the overall physical and mental well-being when they become an adult. And so the ACEs experience really defined as abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction, including mental illness, incarceration, domestic violence of mother and babies, substance use, and also parental divorce. Next slide, please. So as you see here, within the 17,000 of individual, only 1/3 of them do not have any AIDS, and at least 2/3 of them have at least one AIDS or more. And the more ACEs you get, the more negative outcome as you correlate to see the behavior. So some of the more benign behavior, including lack of physical activity associated with smoking, drinking, drug use, and also missed work. So some of these individuals, they really don't feel fulfilled at work. And not surprisingly, the more adverse childhood experience associated with mental health, including depression and higher rate of suicide attempt, and also physical health as well, such as obesity, stroke, heart problem, lung problem, cancer, bone problem, STD, etc. So this is really a try to let everyone know that that's the reason why we need to talk about trauma, because it really introduces a long-term detrimental effect for someone's overall health well-being. Next slide, please. So this is one of the slides I want to spend most of the time, at least a little bit more, to talk about the concept called circle of security. So Chinese is 安稳的循环. So this is one of the fundamental concepts that I practice most of my clinical experience and also as a parent to my children. And so it applied to many of the child-parent relationship, actually many of the interpersonal relationship, a workplace relationship, a couple relationship. So as you will see how it applies. So let's start with the pair of hand here. We're talking about the safe haven. In Chinese, almost like a sense of 一个家的感觉, or like somewhere we belong to. It's a pair of hand that really provide a sense of stability, a sense of security, is how a parent provide this to our child. So for the top of the circle, we're looking for a child who want to explore to this world, right? With curiosity, with explore with the unknown. Sometimes it could be scary in some way, but then for the child who want to explore, this child need to have a sense of security, a sense of stability, with knowing that back of our mind, we have our parents to support us and believe in us to explore in this world. And actually this circle, it applied to 3 years old, it applied to 17 years old, applied to 30 years old, or even older. It depends on how you define in the developmental state. So on this circle, the child, while they are exploring, they want the parents to watch over them, to enjoy with them, to believe in them. So I can share some of our personal experience. As Jennifer in the bio introduction, like I was an international student, came to the state when I was late teens, really by myself, and really exploring the world of America by myself, and a lot of unknown. Could have been something really unsafe happen, but while my family are still in Hong Kong, and I know that back in my mind, I know I have the safe haven on believe in me and support me. And that is really the foundation of a child develop the identity, the self-esteem, that someone is like feeling safe enough to explore this world. So the bottom of the circle is talking about sometimes when a child will feel lost and confused, they sometimes even fail, they will be walking back to the circle and asking for parents like welcome me, coming back to comfort me, to protect me, and more importantly, to organize my feelings. When a child feels overwhelming, they need a stable parent to organize their feeling so that they can move on to the circle again, to explore and feel safe to face some unknown and uncertainty, right? And so this is the circle of security. But what happened in trauma? This is like, we all sort of have some trauma or vulnerable moment one way or the other. Doesn't have to be abuse, neglect, but sometimes sadly they happen that way. But I call the trauma the shark music. For example, what the world reminds us, sometimes we may not be directly impact us, but what it does is it reminds our shark music that living in our past. And sometimes we play this shark music, we do not even realize it is playing. And that is something that really stops us from being able to provide the security for our child. And I will illustrate that more in the next slide. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, when the shark music is playing, for example, when the world is telling us the reminder of today of the Atlanta shooting, or something on the news that remind us about how unsafe it is we are living in, the shark music is playing. And oftentimes we have two extreme reactions when the shark music is playing. One is being hyper arousal state, like 过度紧张的状态. So like meaning feeling like we feel the world is unsafe to let our child to explore, to be like, and that kind of explain sometimes this enmeshed relationship of a child and a parent, that they feel this world is not safe. I need to be really over controlling the child's situation. Like my feeling is the same as my child's feeling, for example. So that would be impeding the top part of the circle for child to explore. Or on the other hand of the spectrum, when we are playing the shark music, this also could have this hypoactive state, 过度压抑的状态. When we are feeling overwhelming, sometimes we could shut down. Doesn't mean we walk away from the child, but sometimes we will feel like not validating our child feeling not feeling safe to talk about the issue. So we really stop us from engaging with our child. So these are the two extreme way when we are reacting to our shark music. But what we can do is that exactly what is stated here, reflective state, meaning we are able to recognize the shark music and be able to regulate and ground ourselves from the shark music. Sometimes I share with my patient that when we are playing the shark music, like I'm trying to use like biology to explain. I'm a biologist before, so like I explain to my patient that trauma sometimes it comes with a fear memory that really store in part of the brain called amygdala. For some of the audience who are parents, so I like to explain it this way. So this kind of fear memory, they kind of associate with the fear emotion. They pack it up together and store in the part of the brain. When there's some reminder out in the world, all of this emotion and memory will just come back up and make us feeling like we are living in this at the present time. So what we need to do in the reflective state is that we are doing a lot of sorting, right? We need to understand that shark music is playing. We need to ground ourselves and recognize that the shark music belongs to the past. And this is what happened now. And what emotion is really belong to us in the past, what emotion belong to us now, and what emotion belong to our child. So in that state, we are able to really communicate with our child. Next slide, please. So this slide is really talking about one of the important communication skill concept called child-parents mentalization. In Chinese called 同理心. So it is easy to understand, but it takes time to practice. I tell parents and the kids, like, the practice make perfect, right? It's easy to say, hard to do. The more you practice, the easier it gets to know how to do it. And once we get to the reflective state from the previous slide, we are able to kind of prepare our mental state to really communicate with our child. The key concept here is really think into the shoes of my child, 那个同理心, how to be curious and not judgmental. I think the two element kind of doesn't come easy together. Be curious and not judging a child when they are sharing with us, and especially thinking in the shoes of your child's age. If your child is 3 years old, like my son is like 3 years old, what they are struggling is like putting the block together. Like, how can I imagine like a 3 years old will be frustrated about that? Or like a 17 years old teens, like they are struggling, looking for major, how do they transition to college? Or like, how do I be curious and not judging, really thinking in the shoes? And with all that element come together, you'll be able to empathize your child. And I think it's particularly important in the immigrant family. We know that parents may be raised from a very different set of cultural value, from the grandparent generation to the parent generation. There's a huge cross-generational, cross-cultural gap there, and I think that is important, that like to understand, to think in the shoes of our children being raised as a second generation or subsequent generation. Things could be quite different in their shoes. How do we practice that? And I think like in clinical setting, I do that all the time to my patient and family, and I also help the child to mentalize their parents too, like to think about when your mom is like criticizing you about what you do in school, like think about what is it like in her shoes when she was raised in a very different culture, in a different, like speaking a very different language, eating a very different food, talking about different way to describe emotion. So like, how do we help our child to also mentalize their parents too? So this is like a two-way communication and helping child and parent to understand better. So this is some fundamental concept I'm trying to share, and in light of talking about vulnerability, processing about trauma, and I think we can talk more about that in our panel discussion. So pass the time, and next slide please, and pass the time to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yuan. I've learned so much about adverse childhood experiences in the circle of security from you, and I believe that the audience has as well. So we've just launched a quick poll for the audience. So we have 2 questions. If everyone could take a couple of seconds to answer the following. First, I have a better understanding of how adverse childhood experiences impact physical health and well-being. You can put strongly disagree to strongly agree. And this is all anonymous. We'll just be looking at how the whole group is doing together. And then the second question being, I have a better understanding of how appropriate mentalization can impact my communications with my child and with others. So thank you so much. So far, we have quite a few responses. And so let's give it a few more seconds, maybe 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And I think that you all can see the results now. So we have somewhat agree, strongly agree, mainly for both. However, if you feel like you still have questions, please do enter them into the Q&A, and we'll make sure to cover them once it's time. But for now, let's go on to our panel discussion. So I'm going to introduce our other three panelists. First, we have Lily Chen. She is the director of United Chinese Americans WAVES, which is our youth mental health collaborative. She is my personal mentor for that, and I learned from her so much. And also she has personal experience as both a Chinese American immigrant and a parent of 5 wonderful children. I know all of them personally too, and so I'm very much looking forward to her personal accounts of her experiences and the challenges that she's faced. Our other speaker is Dr. Annie Lee. She is a psychiatrist at NYU. She has done so much in terms of advocacy and education for the Asian American community. She's co-chair of the Diversity and Culture Committee of the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. She was appointed co-chair of the committee's Asian Caucus. And she continues to do so much work locally and nationally, especially in her capacity as a psychiatrist in New York for the Asian American community. And our next speaker, our third speaker is Dr. Steve Sust, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Stanford. He also has done so much. So all of our panelists are such amazing community advocates. He has a special academic interest in Asian mental health and cultural psychiatry as well. And he is also a member of the Stanford GPAW team, who focuses on communication health for parents of adolescents and others.
Okay, well, so like look at the screen. Oh my God, like I feel so honored and so happy to see my colleague, my friends, and like really tonight is like amazing day to have all of us gathered together. I think it's the serendipity that we feel so compelled to have this conversation, such an important conversation to share with our community, with our parents. And so I think since we're talking about trauma, what it means in this important day, and sometime I think for immigrant family, it's really hard for parents to speak up about the vulnerability, and either like it's hard to have a platform to talk about it or have tools to share about it. And I think tonight we are so fortunate to have Lily Chen, who is a wonderful parents, a proud model for, and also educator to share her experience. And she wrote a wonderful op-ed about the reflection of what are some of her experience in light of the recent event. So I pass the time to Lily, and also encourage our panelists to chime in if you feel it is related to your own experience as well. So Lily, I give it to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Yuan, for giving me this opportunity. I wanted to extend my thank you also to our wonderful host, Jennifer, and Dr. Suss, Dr. Lee, and our President Haipei, and last but not least, all the wonderful volunteers. And I saw a lot of our community leaders, as well as my students from North Carolina Central University, and my chair, Dr. Yolanda Van Riel, and Dr. Sanjaya. So it's really excited to see you all here. So I'm primarily going to speak from the perspective of a parent. So I'm not an educator today. I am not any expert. So I do, as I was listening to you, Dr. Yuan, introducing your theory, so to speak, that are behind it, and the examples, and it just, every time I'm in this kind of webinar, I always say, I really wish I knew more when I was raising my children. Not all my 5 children are adults right now, right? So there's a lot of lessons that I learned as a parent. I think that's my primary reason that I got involved, like helping other parents, and as well as learning myself at the same time about mental health. I think my main thing that I would like to share today, as tonight is the anniversary of the Atlanta shooting. 8 victims died, and 6 of which are Asian American parents. That was a very traumatic experience, and especially since COVID, there's as you have mentioned, there's a rising anti-Asian hate. Just several days ago, actually, I was teaching today. I share my students that when it's a gruesome video of 67-year-old Asian American woman got hit 125 times in the head, and before she was called a racial slur. It was really traumatic, not only to me and also to one of my daughter. Also, I shared with her, and she was really, really upset. So we shared tears, and it just so reminded me a lot of past experience actually related to anti-Asian hate and as well as the Ukraine war right now. It was very hard for everyone, I'm sure. But my framework was defined by my childhood. So I grew up in China. I was born and raised in China. I grew up in Canton, Guangzhou. I remember my father was handcuffed and taken away when I was a child. I remember the time that she was taken away because of the change of a party leadership, because China was a communist country. Therefore, not only himself, but the entire colleagues that she used to work with, most of them were persecuted, in prison. My neighbor right next to us, our balcony faced each other. He could not, I would call him uncle, he could not sustain the pressure from the political pressure. So he died by suicide. I remember that how sad I was because he wasn't living by himself. His family was from another province. So these are the examples that I experienced as a child in terms of trauma. They share the same theme in terms that it is being targeted, but is it being a different reason, political profiling. And that leads to me another instance that recently, I know that a lot of them may not be aware, but a lot of Chinese American scientists are being profiled as well because of the Trump's policy and under the China initiative. These are innocent Chinese American scientists and engineers, scientists and professors. Like Dr. Xiaoxi Xing, Dr. Sherry Chen, and most recently, Professor Gang Chen from MIT and Professor Annie Hu from University of Tennessee. All these people are innocent Chinese Americans, are proven. So they are handcuffed away, and I just could not imagine the trauma, the cost for not only themselves and also their children, because after my father was in prison because of considered as a political disloyal, our apartment was raided. And I remember a group of men came to my home and they lifted my parents' mattress. They're using knives to cut through the mattress, seeing there's any document that's related to Soviet Union at the time, which is Russia, because that was the political situation during that time in China and Soviet Union and Russia right now in the Cold War, right? So, so that incident, again, the reason I remember all that is, of course, is because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The image of the mother in the front page of the New York Times of the lifeless body of the mother and the children on the front page, it was extremely difficult. And then also watching the gunshots, listening to gunshots of the war news in movies, reminding me of the gunshots I heard again while growing up because of the political struggle. I will walk home in one of the major streets in Canton that I will hear the gunshot across the street. I walk that street every day from home and across the street, and that was a Southern Chinese newspaper compound that I will hear the gunshots. But at that time, I think that my parents tried to protect us. They didn't say too much. so that's what we remind him of when I watch the news on the Ukraine war, and I watch the tanks rolling into Ukraine, reminding me of the tanks rolling into the Tiananmen Square in 1989. I came from China in 1988. My brother came in 1989, right after June 4th, the Tiananmen Square. So watching, as I mentioned, the front page of New York Times of the lifeless bodies of a mother and children reminds me of the innocent young people, their life cut short from the Tiananmen Square. So, so it has been very, very traumatic for me and my children, also for my community members, my friends. I remember one morning, 3:30 in the morning, I wasn't sleeping, and she wasn't sleeping. So we just find out, on the WeChat. So I couldn't sleep because I feel so anxious and just too many news. And she primarily worried about her children's mental health. And then also we're reminiscing about those things that we grew up. And that was like a first time because that I really kind of share a little bit more about my past. I have not. We just assume everybody know, and I just nothing was big deal, sort of. So it affected a lot of parents, and that's where my community is a Chinese American immigrant parents. So because when we came in the 80s, we grew up in the 70s or 60s, and some of them older, some of them are younger. And these are the collective trauma we all experience. A little bit older, the generations or ages that my friends are, and they were sent to the countryside, sang山下乡接受再教育. And then I just cannot imagine being a 16 or 17 or 18 or even younger forced labor in the countryside, rip off all the educational opportunities, and that I'm just thinking about the physical abuse or even other forms of abuse and unsupervised. And I remember I grew up too watching those big 哥哥姐姐们, the big sister and brother, the families were just like, watching the train station in Ukraine, I thought about those too. And these are like really sad moments for the family because they knew that they didn't want to send their children to the countryside, but they were forced to because of the policy at that time in China. So we were lucky, we're younger, so we didn't have to be sent to forced labor camp. But anyway, so all of these happening in the United States, in the world, and especially since the COVID about the anti-Asian hate, really kind of made me more and more like the past memories, experiences started kind of surfacing. That I never, like I tried, being so busy, you try to, forget, and you don't just talk about what happens when you were in a childhood, right? And so I think that, thank you so much, Dr. Yuan, and you mentioned that I think it's really, really important. As I was working with a lot of Chinese American mental health professionals and my friends, and, I have to mention my clinical scholar colleagues and also great friends, and, Dr. Wei Yang-shi, Dr. Justin Chan, by the way, that he was planning on coming, but for some reason he couldn't. But and Dr. Juliana Chan, and I have started to learn, and that's why I got into the mental health advocacy in 2016. Is I thought that I was helping my community, right? But slowly I realized that how much I have learned and benefited from. Particularly for tonight, I just wanted to share this experience related to the past several years, past year, and past week, and the past several days. And it seems like it never stopped. These traumatic images and traumatic sufferings of human beings, especially Asian Americans. And nobody feels safe again. Everybody I talk to feels safe again walking in the New York City anymore. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen to me. Am I going to the next gut punch, push down the incoming train? And that's what happens to another lady, right? So I just wanted to, not that I'm a role model, but I just felt like I wanted to, open up this opportunity, hopefully that you too can start, even start just talk about it, or just, let yourself be vulnerable, and let yourself be yourself, and let yourself give yourself grace and time to think about those things you never have time to think about, because you know what, it does affect not only our own mental health, as well as being an Asian parent. We love to, we love our children so much, we can suffer and, do all that, but we would not want our children to suffer. So I know that by doing this, it's going to help me to be more effective mother and parent, so that I can help them. And then I'm a new grandmother too. I'm thinking about my granddaughter, 8 months old Sophia. I love her so much, and I wanted to be able to help her as well. So I think that's the reason that I wanted to open up. And so thank you so much for listening. And I would love to, learn from our wonderful panelists, but I don't want to take the time from Dr. Suss and Dr. Lee. I know that they're both excellent, outstanding child psychiatrists, along with Dr. Yuan. So I'm ready to learn from you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm like in tears, like really, like thank you so much for sharing your life story. I think you serve a living role model for many of the parents here. It really illustrates a powerful point that it's okay to share the trauma, because that is the way how we help our own mental health as parents, and also serve a better model, a teacher for our children to be able to regulate our emotion, be able to feel safe again out in the world. And thank you so much. And so I think my next question want to get into Dr. Lee. And I know Dr. Lee and Dr. Said, you guys are both the leader in our field. We always look up to you. And Dr. Lee also is a proud mother of 2 as well. So as parents and also child adolescent psychiatrists, I would like to hear from your thought about what recommendation do you give for parents, how to cope with all this difficult feeling themselves, and how do they help them, how to support their children in this troubling time. Dr. Lee, I pass the time to you.
Yes, you put me on such a pedestal. I feel like I have so much to live up to that expectation of being an expert. Thank you everyone for participating and taking the time to be with us tonight on this memorable night as we commemorate and remember the lives lost 1 year ago in Atlanta. So Dr. Yun, you pointed out that, first, I'm a child psychiatrist. I'm also a mother of 2 young kids, ages 8, soon to be 9 and 5 years old. And I must say, these 2 years have really been a learning experience and quite an adventure for us. I think that, I think when we think about all the trauma and all the average childhood experiences that you've mentioned earlier on, and then hearing Lily's very candid and very descriptive experience as a survivor, I wish I can say that my kids and the patients that I work with in the emergency room are immune to all of the stressors of the past 2 years, but they haven't. First, my children are both, to put into context about where we are, in this world, my kids are half Chinese and my kids are half Ukrainian. And so just as and of course, we were a family as a physician, frontline worker who had to go to work in an emergency room when the pandemic first started. I'm also a COVID survivor. So we've gone through many, I think, trials and tribulations, and we've gone through it together. And as I reflect back onto all the different things that have happened, including my daughter being, harassed in school and being bullied with a anti-Chinese remark, anti-Asian remark, and navigating through that, it's been a very eye-opening and growing experiences. And all of those things as a mother has informed me how to be a better child psychiatrist, and also how to be in a position to advocate and to use my platform as a child psychiatrist, not only to improve the care of the patients that I work with, but also to take that platform and being a physician advocate to raise awareness to the issues at large to my colleagues and to other professional organizations. So with all the intersectionality that I just mentioned about, my connections to, COVID, anti-Asian racism, and also the war that's currently going on with Russia and Ukraine, I think it might be helpful for me to just summarize a little bit what as a parent I have done and what I've also done for my patients. One of the things that I've learned when we are experiencing through this whole traumatic experience of uncertainties is to own and acknowledge that these past 2 years have been really hard, and these past 2 years have been really uncertain. And to be quite frank, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow either. And to kind of just be really present in the moment and be like, at the end of the day, I'm going to sleep and my family is safe. And that I love them, and I let them know that how much I love them and how much I care about them. And the other thing is, in addition to validating that this is very hard, is to really be grounded and calm. And so I've been using a lot of mindfulness techniques, not just with myself, with my kids and my family, but also with the patients that I work with, because I think, I just saw a patient earlier today who said, I was doing fine. And then all of a sudden the Omicron surge hit in New York City. And then my school went remote again. And then I didn't do well. And then now they're opening up and I don't have to wear a mask. And if I take my mask off too fast, and people are going to judge me, and a lot of social anxiety related to that. And I can see how the uncertainties of like change, just so much change in the past 2 years, that it's really kind of making it really harder for all of us to be grounded in the present moment. So, recognizing, I think, one, how hard and how trying it is and how difficult it is, and then saying to ourselves, hey, we still need to kind of be calm and be in the present moment. It's a big undertaking. So I think being gentle with ourselves is really important. With children, what I have noticed, especially as I navigate this with patients and my own kids, is I've often found myself having to go to a place of inquiry. I've been fortunate enough to have children who are very forthcoming and able to share with me and cultivate a sense of trust, where they're able to come and tell me what happened in their school. And so, the day before my daughter shared with me, something had happened with a classmate, I had noticed some change in her behavior, some irritability, and my radars were up. But at the same time, I try not to be too confrontational and harassing to say, what happened, what happened, what happened? And to come from a place of more just calmness and know that when you are ready, I am here. Right. And not be like, what happened in school today? What happened in school today? I know something is up. I refrain from that and being like, you know what, I am on the radar. I'm going to be hyper vigilant as a parent. But I'll wait for them to tell me. And she eventually did the following day. And, I asked her after she explained to me what happens, like, what would you like for mommy to do? And we brainstormed together, like we can, I can talk to the teacher directly, or you can talk to the teacher directly, or you can talk to your classmate directly, or we can do both. We can talk with the teacher and you can talk with the teacher. And we really engage in a problem-solving technique. And I do that a lot when, kids come into the emergency room in crisis. I really spent a lot of time with them just thinking, here's a situation. Let's brainstorm together. No judgment, but let's think of all the potential ways that we can come about solving this problem. And ultimately she said, I think I want you to talk to the teacher, and I'm going to talk to the teacher too. And we came to that conclusion together, and we worked as a team. And I think that in the end, I was really fortunate enough that the school was so responsive. They addressed it immediately. They made a report out of it, and they really kind of spin the lesson plan and the theme in the school to talk about diversity, which was really empowering. And so fast forward now with the whole Ukraine war and what's going on in Ukraine, obviously I was out of the country when all of this was happening. I was actually in Europe, and as this was unfolding and I read the news, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then of course they're like, mommy, what happened? What's going on? And I'm like, well, mommy was just reading the newspaper and, this is happening. And I think it's important that you guys know because, that's and then they're like, well, why is this important? I'm like, well, actually, that's the country where your grandma and grandpa came from. It's important because daddy is actually Ukrainian and Ukrainian American. And there's like, well, what does that mean? And then we pulled out the map. Actually, I didn't pull out my map. I pulled out my phone, my Google phone, and be like, okay, here's Ukraine. It is Russia, and kind of just allow them to ask questions about, well, why are they doing this? What's doing this? What do they want? And just letting them ask questions. And then, of course, my son was like, are we going to die too? What is war? And I found myself thinking, okay, let's just answer these questions as they come along and just reassure them then not over providing details, but enough at their age level to kind of understand, okay, one country is doing this to another country and we don't know why, but the main thing is that right now you're okay, you're physically safe. But there are people who are being impacted by this, and there are people like your age who might have to leave their country and leave their home. And imagine if you had to leave your home on a short notice, how would that make you feel? Or like we talked about, if you would have some, if you had, like, I was like, well, when mommy came to this country, I couldn't take everything with me. I only took some things that are really important to me because that's all I was allowed to do. I wonder what items you would think are important that you would want to make sure that you would take with you. And having these kind of conversations with them, and more importantly, just also reassuring them that, right now that they're physically safe and that you still get to go to school, you still go to this, you still go to that, it is really important. And one of the things that we did was to help them really visualize and see what was going on. We actually attended a march, in the city that we were in, on the Ukraine war, and let them see, like, okay, hey, this person is carrying the Ukrainian flag. This is important for them, and this is why it's important for them, and this is why it's also important for us to be aware of what's going on. So, I think if I was to impart about ways as a psychiatrist, as a mom, to really be able to be helpful to your children, the first thing I would say is to, one, acknowledge that we're living in some really tough times right now, very full of uncertainties, thrill of change, and it's okay to say that to everyone and to own it. And so it kind of validates that, it's hard to focus in school and there's a lot of distractions taking place. And two is to make sure that we always try to strive to remain in the present moment and be grateful, to think about, like, how we're still in this home together, that there's some physical safety. And three is sometimes it's really important to take their lead. And when they're ready, I think kids always will find a way to be curious and ask questions. And I always tell parents, don't lie, don't deny, tell them the truth, but you're also in control of how much of that truth you can share with them and how much your child can handle whatever truth that is. And I think you're the best gauge of how much they can share, and not to overshare that will overburden them. And they'll tell you if it's too much. I think there's a way that they'll always find a way to tell you that it's too much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I think it is really practical and like I think it is like a living example and teaching your patient and your children about mentalization, that what we just talked about too, right? Like you're being curious, you're being like not judgmental, you're trying to like really work together and listen to your child. And so eventually you guys are on the same side to face the common question, how to target, how to solve the problem. So I think many of the parents will find it really helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I guess I know, like, we talk about trauma, we talk about how parents could be helpful to share the vulnerability, to share the communication, what to cope with the stressor, how to support the children. So I guess I pass on to the next speaker, talking about, hey, like, if nowadays we're talking about it is a children mental health crisis in many places. And before we turn into a crisis or mental illness, is there a way to kind of provide building a stronger mental, emotional wellness, or like building a stronger cultural pride to our children, and so that we don't need to deal with the crisis. We really want to, like, working on a prevention model, promote an early health-seeking behavior in our community. What will be your recommendation from your practice, Dr. Sut?
It's a good, timely question. And as you're asking that question, I'm actually thinking about this new Pixar movie, Turning Red. And it's really a wonderful, sorry, there's a fire alarm test going on in the background, but it's a really wonderful depiction of resilience in a young person. She's fortunate to have a family that wants to be helpful. She has friends who she feels comfortable with and will basically, die for her. And it's important for all of us to really be able to ask ourselves, do our young people have those safe spaces and places? Because it's important to have those personal contacts. I had made a joke earlier about how, there are some things that I'm not going to share with all of the different deans at Stanford. And it's just important to acknowledge that, because it's not that they're not good people, but it's just that I don't know them as well. And I think for all of us, we're obviously going to open up and share with our loved ones or our friends and family that much more quickly than we would with others who are more professional, even someone like myself who's highly trained. That doesn't mean anything if you don't actually know who I am. And so I think it's just important to really think about how well our young people can get access to that right balance of personal and professional support and care, because it's not that one can necessarily replace the other. You need that personal support, someone you can lean on when you're having a hard time, but there's only so much that they can do from their level of experience. And now we need to find, if needed, professional help or some sort of more adult sort of support as a bridge, because there's something to trying to battle through it yourself, but there's a lot of lost time, and there's potentially much more efficient and maybe even less strenuous sort of way to go about getting some of that help. And it's important to, again, meet people where they're at and start with trying to build those safe spaces and places, and just remember those things, those secrets we hold, that we all hold, those things that we're scared to talk about, the things that we're scared that people won't react well to, and to understand how difficult it is to work up the courage to talk about them, and to, again, try to create as safe a space as possible within the realm of what you can do, but then also acknowledge where they're already drawing strength and safety, and to maybe even start there. Truly, Turning Red was this really wonderful story of young people really finding each other and building resilience together in their cohesion, their community, and just being able to have a team that just sort of exemplifies it right there. I would challenge every single parent, every single one of us here, to really think about each of the kids who we know of and we work with, and to really think about, do they have that core, and see that core as the strength that it is, and how do we foster more of those communities? Because truly, internal sort of resilience, internal advocacy starts with that leadership, that courage and conviction, and being able to stand up for what you think is right, and to not have to do it alone, but to know that you've got the support of your friends and your loved ones. That is a very difficult place to be for a young person, to learn that lesson. And frankly, even for me as an adult, I'm still learning that. And I think this is a really powerful time for all of us in the Asian community, because there's so much more representation now than there was before. And my hope for each of our young people is that they do get the chance to find each other and they do build upon it, and that there won't be this time where I'm surprised that there's a Marvel superhero who's of Asian descent. You know, that shouldn't be a surprise anymore for the future, I hope. So with that being said, I don't want to blabber on too much because I'm dying to get to the Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Sud. I think like that's really helpful, like about the advocacy and create a safe space to be non-judgmental, be feeling comfortable to connect and relate. And I think the representation really matters. Look at our panel, like we are all representing and then showing really a strong picture, powerful picture to our next generation of younger folks, that we can do this, right? So I guess like one more question. I think like as tonight we are talking about 1 year after the Atlanta shooting event. And I think many of us want to like curious about what happens second year from now and like subsequent years from now. Around the mid-March every year, we always remember this vulnerable moment. Like, I guess like any panelists, please chime in. Like, what are some ways to cope around this time? Especially, I know some of us have experience working with veterans, like July 4th fireworks always is really hard. And what would be some way to help coping about this difficult timing per se, as a parents or as helping our children as well? Any takers?
Dr. Yoon, Eunice, I can answer that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, part of my work in the Bellevue, you know, child psychiatry emergency room, over the years in providing what we call like trauma-informed care, is that we know that anniversary is a big trigger for patients who have experienced trauma. It could be the loss, the death anniversary of a loved one. It could be maybe the time where a loved one passed away. It could be the time when they experience the abuse incident or the trauma event. But we do know that it becomes a very vulnerable time. And I often find that the weeks and days leading up to the trauma anniversary is probably more vulnerable than the days after, like after the anniversary. And I think that, you know, I think it's important to kind of recognize that, okay, there may be some moments and pockets of vulnerability or feelings of unsteadiness, of feeling that, you know, we're not going to be at that right headspace or mindset as we head into that time frame. And to sometimes not say causation, but to just make a mental association that, okay, this is going to be hard for me. And I'll be quite frank, it was hard for me today. You know, just thinking about how am I going to get through today, just trying to be strong and function and being mindful that, you know, a year ago today, how I was feeling, and then constantly going into New York City, you know, commuting to work and thinking, oh man, this woman in Yonkers just got assaulted. And then, you know, in the past few months, people got, you know, people my age of the same demographic background was, you know, murdered in their own home. And to kind of say that, you know, maybe today may not be the best day that I can give myself 100%. And maybe today may not be the day, and the weeks leading up to it may not be the day that I can do all of what I'm supposed to do. And to say that's okay. And to really just prioritize that. I might have to just go into survival mode in the next few days. And that's okay. It's not permanent. It's not forever. It's not a reflection of my work ethic. It's not a reflection of my character and my personality. It's just this moment in time. And to be really gentle and compassionate, and to say, hey, if I need to take a mental health day, that's okay too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your response, Dr. Lee. I feel like it's really like the compassion to self, like how to practice to be kind to ourselves, and so to be kind to other people too, right? And recognizing and validating that it is okay to be vulnerable and that it's really justifiable too, right? And I know, like from my trauma work, I work with patients, like sometimes I know some of us do not want to talk about the past. Like sometimes it's like, oh, it is in the past. It is hard to fix anyways. But sometimes I kind of put an analogy to help our patient to know sometimes trauma, I know it is not going away. Unfortunately, it is part of us. But like if we can somehow break it down into more tolerable dosing, that we can, I'm sure tonight we are talking about many of this together. Is we are feeling something like today is really special, but we can tolerate it rather than passively responding to the reminder. And now we are more in the living in the presence mode and be able to manage the feeling associated with the trauma. I think that could be helpful in a way as well. Yeah, so well, like no further ado from the panel discussion, and so I know we have quite a lot of interesting questions from the audience. Like, should we move on to the next part? And I know we can continue talking a lot of this interesting and important question. And lastly, thank you so much for our panel. Really appreciate your answer, your expertise, your sharing. You make our conversation so enriching. We feel so empowered. Thank you. So I pass the time to the next part of our event.
Hi, yes, so my name is Sen Shu, and I'm a fourth-year psychiatry resident, and I'm here to begin our question and answer portion of our webinar tonight with our esteemed panelists. Please note that you can also utilize the question and answer box in the bottom of your Zoom screen to type out all your questions, and we'll do our best to collect them and also answer in real time. I wanted to just share a quick disclaimer before we launch into questions. Just please note that while we are accompanied by several wonderful professionals tonight, the purposes of our discussion is not to offer professional medical advice or to answer specific medical questions, but to serve as a safe, non-judgmental space for talking about addressing the effects of Asian violence, discussing parent-child interaction, and increasing mental health awareness, as well as providing general education to the public. And so we ask that you please direct any immediate concerns or questions regarding your own, personal health to your appropriately to your mental health provider or primary care doctor, and I'll include some links below for that. Furthermore, because of the sensitive nature of our current political climate, we want to reserve all the political discussions for another forum, and so thank you for your understanding. And so we're going to go ahead and begin our Q&A session. We do have some questions coming in from the audience, one in particular talking about sort of I have an older daughter who's going to college this fall, and I want to raise my daughter's awareness and alert level without causing her to be afraid of the world. I think this also kind of goes into this idea of, a lot of people in the midst of all this recent violence being committed in the community, people are increasingly fearing for their safety, even while going out and going grocery shopping. And so what are some methods that you guys would propose to kind of strike this balance between, being vigilant, but also, being receptive and open to all the experiences that the community can provide?
I think one of the things that we do with many patients, and I apologize, I do have kids in the background, is that it's helpful to, I think, validate concerns. And I also think that it's important to be having a plan, and not like an elaborate kind of, safety plan or anything, but some form of a kind of like a way to kind of communicate with each other. Okay, maybe this is where I'm going. I plan to be back at this time. I'm available to be reached at this place. while simultaneously offering them the freedom, and just kind of use exercising discretion about like, okay, just make sure you go to a well-lit place, take the well-lit path, travel in groups. If you see something, say something. I think just common, safety practices is important. I think about how, my kids every day have to subject periodically to a lockdown drill in anticipation of a school shooting. And I think that as a family, it's important to kind of think of, just not a specific, elaborate, detailed plan, but just kind of have a sense of communication as to how to be accountable for whereabouts, and what modes of transportation and where in the area you may be, and know and teach them how to ask for help. I think it's really important. And also just encourage them to go and socialize and be with their friends, and because that's really equally important too. And that's something that I know that a lot of kids have been deprived of, during the whole quarantine isolation period. And I think that if you strike a balance between, having these conversations, checking in, and kind of gauge where your child is in terms of their awareness to social events, and just, have conversations with them. I think that they can go into this world, be able to, and we want to encourage them to be able to be independent and take care of themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that too. Sorry, that fire alarm is still killing me. I agree. There's a lot of meeting the young people where they're at. And I was also struggling a little bit earlier with copying and pasting like the best I could do with a written answer. But just to dovetail off of that, I struggle often with not wanting to give the answer sometimes, and to recognize how important it is to use Socratic questioning to draw the answer out of the young person that I'm working with, and to use it as an exercise for them to do critical thinking and critical analysis of a potentially risky and complicated situation. There's an infinite number of things to worry about out there, and we don't want young people to be paralyzed by that fear, but to instead just take a moment and really think about the situation, break it into smaller chunks and pieces, and think through the pros and cons of all the different options that are out there, and also think about what your contingency plan is if your chosen solution doesn't quite work out, or if there's something else that's happening. What we're looking for our young people to do is to not necessarily be unafraid, but it's that they approach all of the complex situations that are out there in the world, whatever it might be, that they have a process by which they think about it, not just internally, but that they also check with other people, whether it's you as a parent, a professor, a mentor, professional, whoever it might be. But it is that very delicate balance that we strike of thinking through the situation and the problem at hand, and trying to really think through with people who we trust and people who have authority, what is the best answer based off of the limited information that we have right now, and where can I go and get more information? Where can I get more ideas? And I think this is really important for young people, because it's a scary world out there, and I wouldn't necessarily want them to live in fear per se, but you should definitely have some amount of vigilance and situational awareness of what's around you, because there's a really important element of having the context of where you're at and being able to protect yourself. And then also, when you're ready, to also know how you're going to help stand up for somebody else who might be being victimized, and how to protect each other. We worry so much about how do we protect ourselves. There's then also the question of this next generation. How do you be an upstander? And how do you stand up for what's right? And how do you do it in a way that's safe enough that it's not going to compromise your safety? And how do you help somebody who is being victimized? These are all complex questions that I would want every single young person to talk about with the people who they trust the most, and get some sense of what would be the right thing to do from a personal value standpoint. And then what's the right thing to do based off of the feedback that I'm getting from other people in my family or people in the community. Now is the time for all of us to stand up, and for us to demand something better, something different. And I think I would hope everybody takes a moment to really think about whether or not that can start with ourselves and the people that we love around us. I'll turn this off
Amen.
before the alarm.
I was saying like, amen, Dr. Sut. That's well said. Thank you. Echo back.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great, actually, it's a great segue into what the next question is, which is exactly, how to begin to address these things, that happen on a daily basis. One of the audience members had mentioned we face racial discrimination and gaslighting every day. Just a few weeks ago, a white man walked to a group of Chinese children to whom the Chinese-speaking librarian was reading a story in Chinese, and he yelled, "This is America, you should all speak English." The kids and parents, including the librarian there, were all traumatized. And so I'm wondering how do we train our kids and also teach our kids how to handle and to deal with this sort of daily trauma that they're experiencing in their lives?
Yeah, I think I echo back to some of Dr. Sun, Dr. Lee said, I believe parents is the best educator for the children. I think as a parents, oftentimes we feel like in the past, we feel like, oh, we just want to put our head down. We don't want to say anything. But that consequences, being silent and don't say anything, is huge. It feels like it validates that situation is being okay, like have somebody else come over to say, hey, this is America, shouldn't say Chinese. I think that is not okay. If I would be the parents in under safety situation, I would really speak up and actually serve as a living education example in front of my kid that it is not okay to be in that situation. How do I adjust that? How do I be calmly but assertively saying that it is not okay in front of my kids? My kids will observe that and be also learn about this is the right way to stand up and adjust that, and that also kind of it's a learning education moment for our children. So I think that is an important moment. And on the flip side, if we don't say anything, don't do anything, it will internalize that the feeling of we are suppressed, we are being outsider. That feeling is really internal. So it's an internalized racism, that feeling associated with that, and eventually it get perpetuated. That become it is okay. And when our child watch parents doing this, and what would they think? They would think oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything when it happened to them directly in another situation. It's a constantly learning experience. So I would be really doing a stand up parents to showcase to my child.
I will echo that as a parent. So since my children are grown adults right now, it was not until in their college years or beyond that they started to experience mental health issues or backflashes of what they experienced in grade school or junior high of these microaggression, mentioning about their food, mentioning about the eyes and things like that. So what made me realize that is that, these things happen in school, and a lot of things we talk about. I particularly love what Dr. Suss said about the safe place to allow your children to share with you, because if they experience a lot of things I remember when they were younger, I was such a busy parent. I did not do a very good job in terms of spending time with them, providing a safe space. That's something that looking back, this is one thing that I would definitely say, who cares about the soccer games or basketball games or swim teams? And, what the children really need is a quality time just to doing nothing and share with you. But I didn't do a good job with that. My husband's better, much better. But so what I'm trying to get back to the question is that they didn't share with us. So when you witness as a parent with your child is absolutely a perfect example for you to say something, to role model that. I understand it was difficult, sometimes you just didn't know what to do, what to say, but that's okay. You can, we did the bystander training. You can have delayed response, even though you didn't know what to say. you can later go to your child and say, you know, mommy should have said something, or daddy should have said something. That was not right. You know, that was, you know, but if you are a quick thinker, you're brave, or, you know, depends on person, you definitely need to say something, or you could go to the librarian and just express to the librarian, and they can intervene. If your child experience bullying at school, they should be able to go to the teacher. They should be able to go to the principal. That's what, you know, Dr. Suss talking about, this community of support, right? So it doesn't just take the child and you reach out to your friends. Like if like I was with another mom, if we felt the same way, two of us started standing up and talking. Is much better than one person. But I think that there is a long-term effect on the children, even though at the time the child might not say something, but it's going to carry on. I'm not going to try to scare the parents over there, okay? But I'm just saying it's important to act.
Yes, no, Lily, I think that's it's really great that we're bringing this out because, you know, like you said, I think the idea that sometimes in that moment you just don't know how to respond and you're shocked, you know, and but it's totally okay to go back and say, hey, you know, what you just heard and experienced was not okay. It's definitely, you know, it was traumatic, and let's talk about it and let's have a conversation. And I think one of the things that I think has come up more recently, and also one of the questions I think is kind of pointing to, is this idea of the effects of trauma and parenting. A specific member in the audience had asked if you had any advice regarding navigating a triggering time without projecting that sort of trigger onto their children. And I think that sort of speaks to perhaps some of the intergenerational trauma that can occur between parents carried on to their children. And so I'm wondering if any of you would like to kind of speak about a little bit about that and how we can sort of keep ourselves in check as perhaps as parents.
I am so sorry, Sen, is this question for a parent?
This question is really maybe for the any of the child adolescent psychiatrists who'd be willing.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Yes.
But Lily, I encourage you to impart your advice only because you seem to have navigated it by just sharing your narrative earlier. It's hard. I certainly know, you know, growing up, I've had my share of experiences which were traumatizing, being discriminated, the comments of, you know, I mean, I still remember myself as a 6-year-old girl coming to this country, not speaking a word of English and being thrown into a first grade class and be like, how do I even ask to go to the bathroom? And you know, and I remember like how, you know, when all of these comments of the xenophobia and anti-racism came up, I'm just like, wow, you know, I felt like my clock just rewinded, like, like back to when I was in first grade and hearing those comments about, you know, oh, where are you from? Who are you? And making fun of, you know, like the Chinese, like ching chong, you know, syllables as I was being mocked for not being able to speak English. And I think that sometimes there is power to maybe taking time for yourself and own that, okay, this is my own trauma, this is my own feelings. And I think there's also power to sharing your lived experience to a certain extent with your children. And I say that earlier where I said that you don't have to tell them all the full details, but you know, you can also say, you know, my mommy was growing up and mommy was your age. I had a different experience. And it wasn't like that when I was growing up. And I'm not saying that I need to compare it, but I just want you to understand that things were just different. And this is what I experienced too. And, you know, also say like, you know, and I want you to know that if that was to ever happen to you, I just hope that you understand that mommy may be able to understand where you're coming from. And in many ways, I also do that. So some of my, you know, some of the patients is to just kind of hear their trauma and hear them and just listen without judgment. and sometimes what I notice is that when I hear my patient's trauma, I get like sometimes like aroused by, oh my gosh, like it's drawing a reaction out of me too. And I'm trying not to be triggered by it, and to kind of be mom and just kind of ground myself in that moment and be like, okay, this is about my kids. This is about my child. This is not about me right now. And pivot that and you know, reach out to my own friends, reach out to my own support system to talk about, you know, the more adult stuff and making sure that I set that boundary appropriately.
Well, okay, I'll try to make it really quick. And again, maybe this is again the recency bias, but having seen Turning Red, there's this like critical moment that I'm not going to give away the whole story, but there is a critical moment where you get to take a peek into the past, and it really enlightens a young person to really get the whole story and to understand what's going on, and frankly humanizes a lot of what seemed to be, you know, very unpredictable sort of behaviors from other characters in the story. And I think that this is a critical moment for all families to really get the chance to use the media, and Turning Red as a chance for all families to have a discussion around the things that the secrets that we protect, the things that we're worried about, and how we navigate them together as a family and how we grow up together. I think there's something really critical about being able to have these discussions in the media, because when you start to bring it home to your personal stuff, it takes on that extra layer of complexity and makes it difficult to talk about. So honestly, for all families out there, this is a great chance for you and your kids to have a really in-depth discussion around what happened in the story of Turning Red and how you might respond in that type of a situation, or how might you help? How could you have changed the ending? Just something to think about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sust, and to all our panelists. Unfortunately, for the sake of time, we are going to end the Q&A here. And we would like to ask all the participants for their feedback on this event with this very, very brief post survey. And please be on the lookout for our future events where we'll still have expert panelists and can continue to engage with these conversations. So you can use this URL in the slide, or use the QR code to access the survey. But any feedback is so crucial to our planning future webinars for everyone. And so for the sake of time, I think we can also move on to the next slide. We'll have the post survey link in the chat as well as sent out after the event. Here are a few resources. These are more urgent resources in case you or someone you love or know needs a crisis line. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the crisis text line, or there is a Chinese, Cantonese and Mandarin warm line that you can access. We have another slide. These are from our colleagues at Chat Together. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Yun.
Oh yeah, so these are all the link about, like the first one is about the CDC Adverse Childhood Experience website. They have the evidence of the study and also a wonderful video describe about the study as well. And also Circle of Security that I introduced. And actually this is one of the really great workshop for parents. They have multiple translated different languages. I highly recommend that for parent and also clinician to attend. Really capture the foundation concept of Circle of Security. And the third one is our Yale Chat Together website. We created a YouTube channel and Facebook resources. So I pass the time to our next slide. Our colleague will talk about Chat Together, and thank you acknowledgement as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Peggy. I'm part of Chat Together. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we do. We're a team based at Yale University that focuses on addressing narratives that shape the Asian experience. We create narratives that address this dynamic experience of being Asian American by creating vignettes through a series of steps that ultimately provide professional coping tips that can be useful in our community. We have our QR code here that will lead you to our website, Facebook, and YouTube channel, where you can see our videos that we've created to address our purpose.
And I think with that, we hope that you'll go to these websites. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, there is another slide.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So we also, in partnership with UCA WAVES, we will be holding a webinar because of AAPI Heritage Month in May. We would like to invite everyone to one of our skits where we will promote Asian child-parent communication. And this webinar details will be coming out soon, so please be on the lookout for it. It will be in late May. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Jennifer for our last slide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peggy. This is a slide we show at every UCA webinar. This is our social media. However, I would like to point out that we have a new UCA WAVES Instagram account, and that's simply at uca.waves for all of our audience members who are on Instagram. I'll just put it in the chat really quickly. We hope that you'll stay engaged, keep in touch with us. Although we do not have the contact info for the panelists publicly available here, we do hope that you'll follow UCA WAVES and chat together, join our email lists, and stay tuned for our future events. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and take care.